On a different subject, you once suggested that the Pentagon be turned into a triangle. Do you still believe that? And what do you think of the management of the Iraq War and the transformation attempts of the Pentagon?
Well, that's covering about three different topics in one. Let me say, first of all, I do think in terms of downsizing, in terms of going to entrepreneurial public management, in terms of using logistics supply chain methods, we still have a Pentagon that is vastly archaic, industrial, and old-fashioned in its purchasing system. We can still take a lot of cost out of the system, and I still think it would be useful for us to think that way. I said years ago, I'm a hawk, but I'm a cheap hawk. I'm still a cheap hawk. I mean, I think there's no reason wasting money in uniform is any better than wasting money anywhere else. Now, I think that's a different question than what do you do about the war on terror and the war on Iraq. So let me separate those two. And I think on balance, most of what Secretary Rumsfeld has tried to do on transformation is right. We have a real problem in discussing the Middle East because we don't understand how to put it in context. We are faced with a long war with the irreconcilable wing of Islam. And it's irreconcilable because, for example, it would not allow any woman to be here. So unless you're willing to give up appearing in public, having a job, having your own checkbook, driving a car, voting, you name it, we're not going to negotiate. So if we're not going to negotiate, and these people are quite, if you go to their websites, many of them in English, they're quite straight about this. And so you start with the idea they really do want a different world than we're going to live in, and therefore one side of it is going to win, because it's not negotiable. Second, the Middle East is a subset of this war. This war is going on in Holland, where a Dutch television producer was killed. It's going on in London, where, remember, the people who did the bombing were British citizens speaking English with every right to vote in an election. So democracy is important, but not sufficient. And so this is going to be a big war. In the Middle East, the Iraq campaign and the Afghan campaign are subsets of this war. And unless you understand it in this framework, unless you understand that Syria, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Pakistan are all dangerous places and could blow up, you can't appreciate how hard this is going to be. And that's my biggest complaint. Nobody's yet prepared to stand up and say, this is going to be really hard. This is going to take a long time. Now, the lady who is in Crawford, I sympathize with her. I'm an Army brat. My father served this country in the infantry for 27 years. But the question we have to have an honest national dialogue about is simple. If we leave Iraq, do you really think Zarqawi is going to retire? Do you think after the victory parade of the people who hate us, they're going to have fewer recruits? You think they're going to be less dangerous? You think Madrid, Amsterdam, London, New York, Washington were accidents? I think that's why we need this dialogue. But we need to elevate it to a level that's serious. And it raises just one other example. People who want the folks in Guantanamo to suddenly be treated like they're normal Americans, you have to ask them a question. These are people who have said as a matter of their religious faith, they intend to kill us. We may end up discovering we have to keep them locked up for their entire lifetime. We haven't been in this kind of war. We don't have ground rules for this kind of fight. And we need a much more substantive, much more serious discussion of the reality of the world we're in. And therefore, putting Iraq inside that discussion is the only way to really talk about Iraq rationally.